I'm Chris Hallberg. I am the resident template master for VuFind at the local library. And I'll be talking about Bootprint, not Blueprint, but you'll see in a few minutes why it gets confusing around here. So, once upon a time, a little piece of software came out called VuFind. This is version 1.6, lovely demonstrated on the iShare website at the Illinois EDU, with the JavaScript loading facets and all the old-fashioned ways of doing things. It used Smarty templates and this lovely library called Yahoo UI, which allowed you to have a grid system that looks something like this. But it also had a lot of different JavaScript things attached to it, and it ran kind of JavaScript. It ran with JavaScript, so it was a little more complicated to use. Luckily, it was soon found that Blueprint, which is a different framework, also allows for the grid, and it was a lot more lightweight. It's CSS only, so it makes things a lot simpler with some just very basic stylings. So everything moved over to Blueprint. And then, as everyone knows, just recently everything got moved to Zen Framework, which is about when I came into the picture. My name is Chris. I helped move everything to Zen Framework. This is where I started working on everything. From there, as our development kept going, nothing else slowed down. So the world started to go mobile. So we added the jQuery mobile theme, which allowed you to have really interesting mobile-enabled interactions as things got smaller and smaller. But there's a couple of problems with jQuery, is that there's multiple versions. You have to maintain a lot of different templates. And that starts to become a problem because a lot of sites don't have mobile users or a mobile version of their interface because you have to maintain a whole separate website and a whole separate front end. And also, I personally find jQuery mobile to be very stubborn. To do even the most basic things, you have to write a lot of code, and it gets very, very, very complicated very, very, very quickly. So then, websites started to do something very interesting called responsive design. Responsive design means that you have one web page, but one web page encompasses all different devices. Your website is smart in CSS and it uses some JavaScript that allows it to scale to any interface. So that way you only maintain one version of your website, all the content stays the same, you don't lose any content, and you actually end up gaining a lot of users. If you look, 516%. So by simply adding responsive features to your site, you don't have to rewrite everything. You have to add probably 25% of the work it would take to make a full mobile side. You can actually target those people who want to use mobile, and that was very important for not only for the library here, but for VuFind going forward. So that's where Bootstrap comes in. Bootstrap is a library just like Blueprint, but allows you to have this scaling, interesting behavior. So if I do a side-by-side comparison here, I recreated this page with these forms in Bootstrap. So you can see the styling is very similar. I didn't add any CSS to this besides the blue bars in the back. And the web page does a very good job of handling different widths. As it gets smaller, you can see the columns start to shrink. And once it gets to a certain point, it actually switches to a one-column view, which is very good for mobile. All the content's still down here. So if you had a really small screen, like if you're looking on your iPhone, you can actually still see everything, get to everything. Nothing gets crammed together, smashed into each other. Whereas the other one that doesn't respond, you only get a small picture of what's going on. You lose some of the visibility, you have to scroll left and right, which is kind of a pain. It's harder to navigate in 2D space. So this made it very interesting. But also, Bootstrap allows for this an even more advanced feature called responsive snap. And this is important. So instead of just scaling fluidly, Bootstrap is aware of the 4 major sizes. We'll call them extra large, where if you have a very big widescreen monitor, it snaps to fill as much space as it can. But if you have a smaller monitor, it snaps to a width. So this is around 940 pixels wide, but if you get a little smaller, you get to about iPad width. If you're at landscape mode, you get a medium view, and then you get a small view as you get down here. So it snaps to different widths, and you can handle it appropriately. Actually, this is the medium width. You can't see the widescreen because the projector isn't wide enough. So medium, iPad width, and then your mobile view. But instead of it just being fluid, you kind of have more control over it because you have these 4 different sizes. So my job over the summer was to apply all of these apply this Bootstrap library to what we find in VuFind, and this is what it looks like. It's very my design philosophy coming into this was to try to harness as much of Bootstrap as I can without adding any other clutter or as little other JavaScript libraries as I can. So the only library that I added was for our important little date slider here. But everything else is styled using 99% Bootstrap code. So if you look at the code, everything's handled with the Bootstrap classes that they give you. Let's see if I can find a simple one. Here's the facets. I can't find a simple one right now. I'll find something later. But it responds as nicely. Actually, what this is when Damien did his demo earlier, he was working off my test server. It was the same. This was the same instance, but this is just the Bootstrap theme over it. So all the extension, everything works. I've been working hard to make sure everything stays congruent between them. Mobile view, which puts the facets down at the bottom, and the like. More about my design philosophy was, if you look at the CSS, if it loads, of course now's when the internet's going to go out, right this very second. If you look at the style, which is where all the styling takes place, there's only one little thing. I want a little margin on the top. And if you go back and look at the screen, which is where like all the default styling takes place, there's very little. There's just a couple helpful classes that I added to make it easier to make things look nicer. But the more I developed it, the less I tried to make it look nice, leaving more room to be styled. Of course, this leaves an opening. From where Bootprint, the default theme of VuFind, currently is. Those beloved little icons that we have aren't really available if you don't use CSS and you don't put a lot of images into it. Luckily, there's a really awesome thing that was built for Bootstrap specifically called Font Awesome. Using the new arbitrary font technology that CSS3 brings into the game, it actually creates a font that has icons. So instead of having like Unicode characters that are out of range, it fills in the space with a lot of useful icons. And this was really, really easy and very simple to add in. So where you normally see a little heart, you would see like the little drawn heart you now see was actually an icon that is drawn from font icons. So all the icons are still there. But I found later that extending this was very, very easy. This also helps you not get the dreaded box, which are all these little Unicode boxes that you get if you don't have an icon or you try to use a Unicode character that works in Chrome but doesn't work in Firefox. This makes it all very easy and cleans it out. Also, when I was doing the Bootstrap theme, I didn't just add the style. I was able to go through and change every single template to be 100% Bootstrap, and that included completely rewriting the lightbox. It was said earlier that the Solar search part was the most complicated part of the code. I think the lightbox JavaScript is a very close second contender for that, but it's much, much simpler now using lightbox modals, which is the same thing as a lightbox, just with a different name. But is it lighter weight? A little. It's 129 less files. That includes like some less JavaScript files that got combined together or got replaced with jQuery behavior as opposed to custom JavaScript that took care of it. But it's not significantly smaller. I know it's like I'm obligated at this point because I worked on it for an entire summer to say it is better, it is faster. But when I used it, especially with the VDL technology that we're going to be talking about after the break, I actually found it was faster and was simpler because it's delivering things a lot more easily. And the classes that Bootstrap brings are much friendlier to the browser, that the render times are a lot less, and the JavaScript's not taking as long, and it's much more streamlined. So, along with the loss of the icons, we lost a lot of that pretty theme. Bootstrap looks nice, but some of the padding really bothers me. It's not really a theme that you could throw out and use just yet. So what I did was I took our beloved Bootprint theme, and I added our Bootstrap theme to it, and I got what I like to call Bootprint. And now you can see why it gets very confusing downstairs. There's a lot of these Bootstrap puns going around. We have View Boot and we have Chris Strap. But Bootprint is the blueprint theme recreated by styling the Bootstrap theme. So you can see all those icons are back. It looks the same. The font size is back to a normal size. And it has all the features and all the responsiveness of Bootstrap, but it looks like Blueprints. I get a little confused sometimes as well. So that was a very important step, I think, when it comes to libraries being made responsive, is that you can actually, now there's actually the same theme that you've had would probably work with a lot of stylings you already have. It's just a lot less of a step to change it. But what's next? Because we mentioned this earlier, but because of Damien and I both kind of like to keep the non-JavaScript users in there. It is only 2%, but they're important. I lost that link. It's somewhere around here. But it's 2%. This it? Nope. Here it is. It is only 2%, but 2% is a lot of people considering how big the internet is. It's twice the size of the entire population of New York City, which is a lot of people. So is it worth the effort? It doesn't really take that long to create a server side. But unfortunately, that leaves us out of some technologies that we're going to wait a little while for that percentage to shrink down. Some of those technologies include Less. Less is a very awesome CSS library, which allows you to basically write CSS classes as if they're actually classes. They inherit from each other. They have variables. It's much easier to do things. So for example, if I wanted to style something, like these boxes right in here where it's much simpler, for the blue ones you see on the left, I have to add 3 classes. I have to add span3 to let it know that it's a fourth of the page, which is now 12 columns wide. I have to make it a well, which gives it that nice inset shadowing. Then I have to add alert info to make it blue. In the code of Bootstrap, the theme for VuFind, a lot of the classes, like the result list, each one already has a result class in it because there's JavaScript that triggers with that. But unfortunately, I have to add all these classes as well. So some of the class tags have like 8 different names in there, and that really bothers me because it can be so much simpler. What I could do is that instead of having to copy and paste all that CSS with Less, I could write .result, and then underneath it, you can see, I don't have is the laser pointer up here? That's not. If you look at the second one down over there, box shadow has another class inside of it. So I could do .result, and then inside of it I could do .well, .span, .thank you. So here you see, this is a CSS class up here. This one down here is actually using all the same stylings. So that would allow a lot of the code to come out, and that would actually really shrink down the size of the templates and make everything load, really decrease the bandwidth that's being used. Another thing that's really important is browser compatibility. Here at the library, about 27% of the requests that we get are from IE8 or less, which is a lot compared to the 5% of the rest of the world. And that's really important because that prevents us from using the newest version of jQuery, which is, as we just saw from the GitHub error that we got, which is actually a really nice segue into this, is that people are starting to drop compatibility for those lesser browsers. And one of the things that came out of that is jQuery 2.0, which is jQuery, that wonderful library that we all love, and I don't have a link to. But it's a lot smaller and condensed and faster because they took out all the bloaty code that's required to keep everything working the same in these older browsers. And of course, as people move forward and drop compatibility, Bootstrap decided to do the same thing. Unfortunately, Bootstrap decided to do it. I don't know if you can see at the very bottom, but I started development on the Bootstrap theme on August 12th, and on August 19th, exactly 1 week later, Bootstrap 3 is released to the public and is completely different. So I had to make a choice. I had to look at how wonderful the new Bootstrap looks, and I had to stick with 2.0. But here, if I had done everything in 3, welcome to Bootstrap 3.0. Now, it looks pretty much the same, and it's the future, but we wanted to keep those legacy browsers in there for just a little while longer. But to give you a taste of what would have happened or what is going to come when I port everything over again to Bootstrap 3, is there's some really interesting new things that they've added. For example, you see that if you watch the top column as I shrink down, it's much more easier to do things like this. Now, if you didn't notice, if you watch where the Yahoo UI link is, right here, it's now the third element, 1, 2, 3, where when it was wider, it was the last element. Doing things like that where you can switch columns around and resize everything based on the size of your screen. So now I can switch this from a 4 wide to a 1 and 3. That kind of behavior they made really, really easy. And by easy, I mean you get to add a lot of classes to it. So this very long, gets into like the 8 long name things I'm getting to, is much longer than anything that's in the Bootstrap theme, and it each does something. So this last one here lets the browser know, this is for this last Smarty block over here, that when the screen is extra small in the mobile view, we only want it to take up a third of the screen. When we're at like a smaller size, it should take up half, which it was doing right now, and it should also push it to the right. On medium, it should take up a quarter and stay where it is. Don't push it anywhere. And when it's large, I shrunk it down a little bit, but the monitor doesn't get up there. And I want it to be well so it looks nice. So that kind of compounded classes is something that I wouldn't really want to get into unless we had the less CSS on top of it as well. And also the dreaded box, the light box, actually is a lot nicer. If it gets longer, you can scroll, which is something that was not handled very well in previous versions of not only the Blueprint light box, but also in the previous Bootstrap light box. There's new things like panels as well. Let me get back here. But overall, Bootstrap is live. It's up on the GitHub right now. It's slated for a 2.2 release, but if you want to play with it, either when you get back or tomorrow during the Hackfest, it's all up on the GitHub master. Both Blueprint and Bootprint. See, I get confused too. Bootstrap and Bootprint are both here, and they're both completely functioning. They're completely up to date. I'm the one in charge of keeping all the things maintained. So I'm going to open it right up now for questions. I lost the clock.
You have 5 minutes for questions.
Perfect.
There's a clock on the computer.
There is. I work in it all day and I forget that. But if anyone has any questions right now, I'm sure I'll be swamped tomorrow. Yeah.
You mentioned starting development with less.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to take a look at another node utility called Grunt. It
Mm-hmm.
actually does dynamic less compilation into CSS, so you can start building your less classes while you're also building compatible CSS classes that work with browsers outright.
Yeah, if you're using a Node server though, right? A Node.js server?
That only for compilation.
Okay. He pointed out that there are libraries that allow you to work with less immediately by compiling the less scripts into CSS scripts, which is what is necessary to actually use less. But I thought that was only possible.
I'm in the middle right now of getting a responsive design together. Do you find all the meetings go a lot longer when you're actually wireframing for all those devices? So you don't have a mobile person and a desktop person. You have that one person's doing it all for all those devices.
It's really just me and Dave Uspel on that. So it's a much smaller team, but yeah, we don't really have a mobile part of it. Right now, we actually are working on launching a responsive design for Villanova. Villanova's got a responsive design. The Villanova library has a responsive design. VuFind is the last part to go in there, and I was waiting on the finishing of the Bootprint theme. But our meetings don't take much longer. But our meetings, when we did our meetings about it, it took longer for us to pick the colors than to decide where everything goes, because the design that we had, so we switched to these pills, which on a wider monitor are to the left of the search bar. This pill design was basically immediately accepted, so we were very lucky that this pill is very friendly to mobile interfaces. So the entire team was kind of on board with this design.
Have you heard from anyone else outside of here, particularly with VuFind, that have gone ahead with Bootstrap version 3?
Not yet. I haven't. Have you heard? It's still very new. There was one library that was working on it before I was working on it, and I looked at what they were doing, but it wasn't nearly as comprehensive as what the Bootstrap theme was. Actually, what's your main name? Might have been.
I work for AI Network in Pittsburgh. So
Okay.
we're getting together on responsive design. Right now it's just a separate jQuery mobile thing, and then we're working our way to go to the responsive design completely. And then a lot of the meetings go where when you get to a smaller deciding what stays above the fold. There's a lot of the
Yeah.
conversations.
That is the one of the problems, and there's also, you didn't see it, but I had to resize the window wide every time I went back to my slide website, because when it does compress down, it does make it really tall. He's talking. The question, because I forgot to repeat it, was about meetings and deciding on not only one design at the same time. You have to have the mobile and the semi-mobile for the iPad and the full desktop. People all together to have a meeting about what stays above the fold and what gets lost. And
Yeah, the usability.
Yeah.
Usability testing. It definitely goes on longer when you put in the responsive design.
yeah, when you keep usability in mind, it does make it more complicated, but the implementation is much easier with a responsive design, than having to have an entirely different front for that. Good, excellent. Any questions? Yes.
I feel like you specifically pointed out the snapping behavior of
Yes.
Bootstrap, but I guess I just don't see what's so awesome about it.
What it does is it makes it actually this is actually a
Seems
perfect
like
example.
gradual behavior would be sort of more effective.
The question is about why the snapping is more beneficial than the fluid sizing of everything, and that comes into play when you have things like this. Right now the 4 search pills, we call them. I have a laser pointer. Are now below it, but I wonder if I just zoom out. Yep. If your desktop is wide enough, it puts it next to it. So what the snapping does, it allows you to pick basically 4 different designs. So when it's large like this, okay, we want it to look like this. But once we start to lose that real estate, what do we go for the next step? So when you have a fluid design, you do have to pick those steps along the way. And as you saw, even with the fluid, at one point just snap to a 1-column view. But using it's just another style sheet and a little JavaScript class that Bootstrap provides that you just add to the site, and it automatically snaps it all for you. It allows you to think about it more in 4 steps that respond to very, very smart things. So the VuFind width is 950, like fixed width, which was the previous design idea. So it gives you that when you're on a monitor, but if you have a bigger monitor, it does fluidly fill up as much space as it can. But then it snaps smartly to, like I said, the width of an iPad if you had it like a landscape. Then mobile beneath that. So instead of thinking about it, instead of having to pick your own steps, it provides you smart steps that actually are already adapted and chosen to today's technology to think about how the different things work. Yeah. The development's about the same. It just from a design, where do the pills go? Like that question is much simpler when you have 4 steps as opposed to an entire smooth range, which is why actually in Bootstrap 3 they got rid of a lot of the smooth range behavior and they kept it to the 4 steps because a lot of designers liked it better.
It makes sense. You're not really coding for the experience of making the window bigger and
Right.
smaller.
Right.
Experience.
That's why I like the fact that they have a wide version, because normally I think responsive is from here down, but they allow, if you have a huge monitor, it doesn't waste any space. Any more questions?
Okay.
I'll be available for the hackathon tomorrow.